You want to see something stupid? It's on topic, trust me. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it would appear that we are now witnessing the very dissolution of time itself in The Strangers Chapter 2. To kick this video off, I'm gonna go through the series of events in the film and question my sanity more and more as I realize how little sense any of this makes, and then I'll be giving each pass of time a score on the stupid scale. Ready? Let's go. So when the strangers first arrive at the hospital, the clock reads around 8:50. When they first come for Maya, however, it's now 11:23, which means that for 2 hours and 38 minutes, the strangers were enjoying some delectable hospital food, I guess. Maybe they were killing more of the staff, but according to the end of the movie, they can kill a lot of people in a very short period of time, so I don't know about that one. Maybe they were sampling the various medications, who knows? On the stupid scale, I'm giving this a pretty low 2 out of 10 because they maybe needed to catch some rest before getting back on the job, and it's gonna get way dumber. Now here's where it starts to get fun, because The Strangers Chapter 2 is essentially one long chase sequence where the only time jumps come during mostly points where Maya is asleep or unconscious. As an example, during her being chased through the hospital, we really don't miss anything or skip time. She runs from her room, goes down the thing, runs into the morgue, and then escapes. Nothing lost. She goes to a horse girl who gets killed, which I suppose could have taken some time, and after a brief chase sequence, she hops in a ride. At the start of that chase, her phone read 11:23 p.m., and yet when she flags the car down after getting away, the clock in that car says it's now 3:38 a.m. Now, I suppose it's possible that it took Maya 4 hours and 5 minutes to go through the hospital, get to this house, and hop in the ride, but I'll say, it sure as hell doesn't look to me like Maya's been going for that long. My explanation? She was in the dumbwaiter for 3.5 hours taking a nap. This one's getting a 7 out of 10 on the stupid scale. We're ramping up. So 3:38 a.m. she gets in that car, and she's in it for probably around 10 minutes before leaping out and running off into the woods. So this movie takes place at the end of September, the date specifically being September 29th on this day, which means that in Portland, Oregon, where the film takes place, sunrise would come around 7:06 a.m. And after running out of the car and through the woods for a bit before settling down at a river to tend to her wound, the sun's up. So it's been another 3.5 hours at least from the time when she got in the car to when she got to this river. Maya has now been running for nearly 8 hours, the cardio of a god, it would appear. Adrenaline does a lot, for sure, but we have to assume that this river is not far from the edge of the woods, considering the strangers later find her discarded bandage with relative ease. On the stupid scale, I'm gonna give this one a 6 out of 10. Maybe she's been playing a lot of Animal Crossing and wanted to go fishing for a little bit to live her video game dreams. Once her wounds are tended to and she's gone through the Battle of the Boar, I will get to that, she somehow manages to randomly stumble on the cabin where her and Ryan had been staying, which is dumb, but not part of the scale that we're working with right now. On the clock in the cop's truck, we can see it's now 12:31 p.m. And since it seemed like we were a little before the golden hour of sunrise back at the river, I'd say it was anywhere from 6:30 to 7 a.m. maybe? So now we have a 5.5 to 6 hour time jump from where she was to where she gets to the cabin. That makes it even dumber that she just randomly happened upon the cabin in the woods, considering that she was aimlessly wandering around for that amount of time in an area that she does not know. And while I'm not buying that it's been that long, I'll give this an 8 out of 10 on the stupid scale solely because there's no goddamn way. Later in the lake house, it's 12:24 a.m. Nothing too unbelievable here. She's been here a little while and was unconscious most of the day. However, when we see her phone reading 12:24 a.m. That comes at the 1 hour, 13 minute, and 9 second mark of the movie. And then at the 1 hour and 14 minute mark even, after no time lost and one continuous moment of her watching two people outside, it's now 12:28 a.m., which means that in the span of 51 seconds, 4 minutes have somehow passed. 9 out of 10 on the stupid scale. 2 minutes later, at the 1 hour, 16 minute, and 1 second mark, again with no loss of time in the movie, it's now 12:39, which means that in the span of 2 minutes and 1 second, it's been 11 fucking minutes. 9.5 out of 10 on the stupid scale. The 10 out of 10 on the stupid scale is also born of this sequence where around the 1 hour and 14 minute mark, Gregory pulls off in his car after an argument with a housemate. And then at the 1 hour and 17 minute mark, it's revealed that all of the housemates have been murdered, bound up in chairs just as Maya and Ryan had been, with their throats cut and blood spattered all over the floor. Not only that, but their wounds are not bleeding all that much at this point, which means that in 3 minutes, the strangers not only went through the process of somehow binding them to chairs and killing them with enough time for their wounds to somewhat coagulate and let out most of the blood that they will. The one on the right barely has any blood around her neck at all, which is weird in its own right. Extremely stupid. I'm giving that a 10 out of 10 on the stupid scale. I wonder what laws of reality The Strangers Chapter 3 will decide to do away with. I would imagine that physical boundaries will no longer be a restriction, and Maya will be phasing through concrete walls and unable to be stabbed as her molecules bounce around the knives, so that should be fun. So thankfully that all checks out. I can see no holes in any of this. What a relief. I was worried the movie didn't make sense for a second there. Welcome to The Strangers Chapter 2, everyone. You know, I would like to conduct an experiment because for all intents and purposes, you don't need to see the first one in order to understand what's going on here. Maya's boyfriend was killed by the strangers and she's in the hospital. There you go. You're all caught up. I want to see the look on someone's face if I show them this movie with only that context, and then upon the credits, graciously rolling as my companion's jaw hangs agape and their soul wades its way back to their body through waters muddied by an experience painful enough to make someone question whether or not they even liked movies in the first place. I want to tell them that this was a genuinely better movie than the first one, and see what facial features previously unknown to humanity are born unto their expression as their returning soul decides that maybe it's not worth coming back. I mean that. The Strangers Chapter 2 is an absolute slog and unfathomably stupid, and yet it's still somehow better than the atrocity of that first movie. I will say, I was rather baffled by hearing Rennie Harlan talk about the setting of the film at a panel during the San Diego Comic-Con. He was asked about this movie's parallels to Halloween 2's setting, and he said that he forgot Halloween 2 had this, in his words, whole big hospital thing in it. Are you referring to the fucking setting of the entire movie? God. You know what I'm gonna do right now? I'm gonna start by talking about the things that I actually liked about The Strangers Chapter 2, and to the surprise of myself, and I'm assuming everyone else, that isn't just relegated to one fleeting moment where the tone kind of clicks for me like was the case in the first one. There are a couple things in The Strangers Chapter 2 that I genuinely thought were well done. The first point is this nice oneer very early on in the film when Maya is being chased. I've always called this guy Man in the Mask because I thought that's what he was called, but apparently it's Scarecrow, which is cooler, and I need as much entertainment as I can get here, so that's what we're going with. She's getting chased by Scarecrow, and there's this long one take that they do showing her navigating her way through a section of the hospital, and it's actually very well shot. The camera work here is interesting, it's dynamic. It would have taken a lot of planning and been a challenge to execute since they're moving around desks and through doors and stuff like that. It's actually a really well shot sequence. Even if it's where we learn that Maya, like the strangers before her, can teleport, but we'll get back to that. I was not expecting to be impressed by the camera work, and yet here we are. Good job. I really mean that. The other thing that I thought was really good here was a sequence of Maya after escaping into the woods, where she realizes that her stab wound from the end of the first movie has opened and she needs to stitch it closed again. And they let this scene linger for a while as she painfully goes through with this bit of medical treatment. Madeline Petch is honestly like the only thing keeping me alive in these movies so far. Because even if she doesn't necessarily do the best with some of the less intense material, when she's scared or in pain or something like that, she does a fantastic job of getting across that feeling and making the material land properly. I really do think she's quite good, and it's a shame that she's in these movies because now her face is going to be associated with that for a lot of people, and that's rough. This scene goes on for a long time, and while 85% of this movie is padding, this is the one prolonged sequence that feels like it actually earns its length because of how well she sells the struggle of doing this. I was actually wincing at how believably painful the whole thing felt, and it's nice to see her taking on this sort of survivalist mentality and gritting her way through what she knows she needs to do. Made me respect her character a bit more, and made me eternally grateful that Petch is here to give something for me to latch onto throughout the experience. Outside of those specific scenarios, and this is going to come as a surprise, they actually did a decent job a couple of times at building tension. What the fuck? Not saying it's some crazy nail biter or anything, but they do manage to get that feeling of being on edge a million times better than the first one ever did. Or like nine times, okay, maybe 7 times better. Still better though, and I was glad to have at least some of this horror movie actually feel like it knew how to create some tension. Go figure. I do think that a part of this comes from the fact that I find the strangers themselves to be some of the most intimidating and frightening horror antagonists, and just seeing them kind of puts me on edge, but that's only credited to the first 2 movies. I didn't get any of that feeling in Chapter 1, so they must have been doing something right this time around. Unfortunately, that's pretty much going to be a wrap on the positives, because The Strangers Chapter 2 is a really bad movie, but it's almost fascinatingly so in a different way than the first one was. That movie sucked because it was a painfully unoriginal retread of the original 2008 film, completely lacking in any amount of creativity, with some of the most blatantly stupid character moments I've ever witnessed. The second one is terrible because it's just fucking boring and uninteresting. This entire thing is Maya thinking she's safe, realizing that they found her again, running for a bit, getting a few close calls before escaping, thinking she's found another point of safety, and then rinse and repeat for 98 minutes. This continues to make my brain spin with confusion because they wrote what's essentially a 4-hour-long Strangers film. For the first 2/3 of this story, we've had zero indication that any of this needs as much time dedicated to it as it's getting. If they'd compressed this into 1 2-hour-long film, it probably would work a lot better. And that becomes even more apparent in this one because of how much padding we have to sit through. They are so stretched thin for ideas already. On top of how excessively repetitive it all is, there is a scene that feels so bafflingly out of place that it makes you wonder if they forgot what movie they were making for a moment. After being chased out into the woods, Maya gets herself a fire going when she's attacked by a boar? Excuse me? It goes on for a really long time, and for the vast majority of the scene, you don't even see what it is that's attacking her. Presumably because they didn't want to put too much money into the scene. Most of the actual attack is done while she's inside a car that's being broken apart by what seems like some invisible spirit, like they forgot to CG the boar into the scene. When we do see it, the whole thing devolves into the strangest ripoff I've seen in years, where it's basically like a beat-for-beat recreation of the bear attack from The Revenant. I don't think that's just because I recently rewatched that movie. It was like 2 weeks ago I watched it. It's truly the exact same sequence of events, but just way less cool. On top of how confusingly out of place this is and how much it feels like this trilogy is continuing to waste our time with random bullshit, it becomes even dumber when you realize that this is an attack boar sent by Scarecrow. He somehow manages to stumble across Maya's discarded bandages in the woods and then uses those to give the boar her scent and sends it off to go find her. I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth, and I worry that in saying them, I have burned even more brain cells than I lost by simply sitting down to watch this nonsense twice. There's more to this too, and it's tied into the stuff they added in reshoots, but I'm gonna save that for a bit, because it's that shit that left me wailing in tears from laughter as you saw at the start of this video. Before that, this is a part of the modern day trilogy of Strangers films, which means we have to talk a bit about the blatantly stupid logic. If you saw my video on the first movie, you may recall that we spoke about this trilogy's problems pertaining to object permanence and geological consistency. I can say that at least one of those things is fixed because we don't have any moments where it feels like they've randomly gone to some completely different type of forest for a second. However, the other thing is still here. And that feeling that the movie setting is being inconsistent is replaced by something that's perhaps a little quieter and less noticeable, but is arguably far dumber. Just before I talk about what that is, as I mentioned earlier, Maya can teleport in this movie. My headcanon is that whatever food they're serving at that diner is infused with magical powers, and she's only coming to realize them now. These people are all wizards, do not argue with me. I spent some time talking about being impressed by that long oneer earlier on, but that's almost entirely restricted to the technical standpoint, and I wouldn't blame anyone for not noticing it because the things actually happening here are so ridiculously stupid that it distracts from everything else. Maya is trying to sneak around and escape from Scarecrow here, and so she decides that her best course of action is to go into this room right next to him and start loudly shutting the curtains to set up an escape plan, which for some reason, unknown to me, does not cause him to immediately run over there as we see him doing in literally the next scene. He looks right at her too and doesn't seem to be in much of a hurry, but where Maya's show of belonging on Waverly Place comes in is when he actually comes into the room, she suddenly teleports to the other end. And no, she didn't just duck down and run to the other side, because there's an open door right there, and he would have seen her getting in touch with her inner furry to get over there. She's over here, never crosses the middle, and then she's over there. She learns from the best, I suppose. Alright, so what if this story... like I mentioned, this is effectively just a fucking chase scene, and that's it. We do get to know some new characters here, but there's absolutely nothing to them. Not a single one of these people plays any role in the story, and it's basically all just setting up that third film. Richard Brake at least speaks this time around, and we get a couple of sequences of him and his partner, but there's no fucking point to any of this. We get some more hinting that perhaps he's not a great dude, but when was the last time you saw Richard Brake play a good person? This isn't going to come as a surprise to anyone when they eventually try and pull some twist in the third movie, and they do absolutely nothing with him in this one aside from having him on screen a couple of times. That brings me to Gregory, who is one of the strangest and most irritating characters I've seen in a long time. You remember how often in the first chapter they shot Ryan in these really awkward close-ups? That they just turned that into a whole ass character. He's a friend of the nurse who took care of Maya in the hospital and continues to help her through the rest of the film, and this guy just fucking sucks in every conceivable way. It's pretty clear that they want us to think that this guy is one of the strangers. He's got the build for Scarecrow, but I have a feeling that he isn't actually one of them because it's way too clear of a red herring, and it's going to be extremely dumb if it actually turns out that he is one. We'll have to wait and see, but what we have of him in this movie is a lot of really uncomfortable close-ups, where he stares at her like he's in the middle of a K-hole at all times. He drinks a lot, he's an asshole to everyone, and in one of the most infuriating scenes of the film, he asks Maya what she was thinking about when she was attacked. It's a big nothing burger, but what bothers me so much about this scene isn't how poor of a character he is, it's Maya's completely unjustified willingness to have this conversation. In every single scene that Gregory is in, Maya is extremely uncomfortable and avoidant, as she should be. Not only that, but one of the big things that happens constantly throughout this movie is that Maya is unwilling to trust basically anyone. The whole town acts weird as hell, so I don't blame her, but she gets so sketched out in the car that she decides to hop out of a moving vehicle in the middle of the night and run off into the woods on her own. Something that this movie seems to forget fairly often is that Maya was just attacked in the cabin and her fiancé was just murdered in front of her. And yet we get these moments where she just seems way too accepting of what's happened. Not in the sense that she's in shock and dissociating, but just that she'll randomly be talking about these things like there's some distant memory that she's had time to process.
Two were like, doll masks?
The scene is the worst example of that for me because of how much of a shitty person Gregory is. They set up zero reason for Maya to open up about such a fresh, personal, and horrifying experience to him, and it's the most forced and on-the-nose way of trying to get across some of Maya's internal processing of what's happened while attempting to further our suspicions of Gregory. I hate everything about this scene, especially because the movie goes out of its way to point out that Maya is suspecting him of being the one behind the mask. Is this the movie's way of trying to set her up to seem intimidating and like she knows that it's him and she's still doing this? I don't buy it. I don't think she'd give him that pleasure. She'll go from being entirely closed off and unwilling to trust anyone one moment to chilling right the hell out and acting like she's in a therapy session in the next, and they don't do a goddamn thing to justify it. Maya is actually under the impression here that the people hosting her in this house want to hurt her, and yet for this scene she's just like, yeah, that shit hurt. It's just so forced with these constant close-ups on the knife he's using. I mean, on that topic, the scene in the car damn near drove me up the wall because of how forced the writing is. This woman was in the military, and so they used that as a reason for her to have a Bowie knife on her, which she uses to cut an apple and then leaves it right on the center console of the car not 2 minutes after Maya was flipping shit and kicking the door to try and escape from here. You're gonna tell me that someone who's ex-military is gonna leave a fucking Bowie knife within reach of someone who's been severely traumatized and just had an explosion like that? No! See, that's the thing with this movie. It has so little to offer when trying to think about things to even say about it. So much of it just comes down to these dumb little moments that show how little of a shit they gave about anything making any sense. It's some of the most contrived writing I've seen in a long time, where every turn has the most convenient thing for the basic-ass story they want to tell. The one woman who Maya happens across after escaping the hospital has a gun and begins to warn her about the sheriff before getting shot right as she's getting to the point, and then her gun only has one shot loaded into it, so Maya can't use any. She can't. That's two rather forced points in one scene. But then we have that thing with the Bowie knife and the medical supplies being placed perfectly within reach for Maya. So, the strangers happen to find her binds in the woods. She randomly stumbles into the cabin where the first movie takes place just as the cop is showing up, and he gets killed right before they leave. It's so fucking lazy. I mean, to be fair, the med kit being placed there does make more sense. It's just a pattern, man. If you had one or two of these moments in your movie, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But it feels like every single thing that happens here had zero thought behind it and is just contrived, and it's cliched series of events. It's the most cliched way you could possibly muster. Can you tell I'm losing some steam here? This movie, this series, this new trilogy is exhausting me. Another big frustration that I had while she's still in the hospital, Maya is backed into a corner in the morgue and decides to hide in one of the freezers. There's a lot of dumb shit about this scene. Probably the most egregious thing is when Scarecrow stands right in front of the freezer that she's in and stares through the grill, and we can see tons of light pouring directly onto her face, which is damn near pressed up to the door, and she has reflective nails right now. And yet he somehow doesn't see her there. Do these people know how light works? The same thing happened in the first movie, and it's somehow even more egregious here. Scarecrow also just stands there and doesn't immediately open this one, as we've seen him do with all of the others, and especially since they've shown him being quite thorough with his searches throughout this scene, it makes me want to fill my nose with sand watching him just fucking stand there this time, because this movie needs so much plot armor in order for Maya to not die 35 times over throughout this story. He's distracted by a hospital worker who just stands there and dies. Okay, sure. Scarecrow doesn't even bother checking that freezer at all after that. Side note, the kills in this movie suck. You'd expect, since they wanted to make a 98-minute chase sequence, that we'd get some really cool set pieces and brutal kills as the focus, but no, most of them are off-screen and not a single one is memorable. Halloween Kills went in a bit of a similar direction of wanting to just focus on the mayhem and put story aside for the middle chapter of the trilogy, but at least there we had tons of amazing kills, some cool set pieces, a great soundtrack, awesome Halloween night atmosphere, a scary as shit Michael Myers. Here it's just bland. Also, the characters in that movie were actually fun. This movie has fucking nothing to offer. Anyway, the thing that really got me going with that scene in the morgue is that Maya decides to hide in what turns out to be where Ryan's body is stored. Why does this piss me off? Because it's a fucking great idea for this movie, and they completely fumbled it. The body that we see her pull out initially is some random dude, and she apparently decides to hide in another one. So they wanted that to be a really disturbing and twisted reveal that this is what she's with. Except they didn't do anything with it. Seems to be a pattern. Well, there seems to be a pattern. I'm gonna admit myself to a psych ward after chapter 3. Because I'm still gonna watch it for some reason. It's like they thought just having that be the case would be enough for the scene to work. Throw in one moment of her being sad after Scarecrow leaves and we can call it a day. Great work, fellas. I know what the thought process was behind making us think that she'd crawled into one with someone who we didn't know because they wanted the shock of it being Ryan, but I feel like this could have been so much better if she realized that her only option was the one with Ryan in it, and she had to fight with the reality of what it was that she needed to do to survive here. We're robbed of that moment of her trying to force herself in there, which would have been a super effective sequence, and then the movie reminds us that it's completely incapable of evoking emotion in any way by opting for the simplest and most bland attempt, by just doing a flashback and then having her make a sad face. Also, while I'm in a complaining mood, this is not what dead people look like. He just looks like he fell asleep while attempting an Edward Cullen cosplay. Hey, what about those reshoots, though? Well, we actually know what was added from these. Although Harlan is apparently not wanting to refer to these as reshoots and instead as enhancements. Let us take a closer look at the title of the movie. If we look real closely, you can see that the combination of letters contained within the title spell out the word strangers, which is defined as a person or thing that is unknown or with whom one is unacquainted. Pretty cut and dry, and that unknowability is part of what makes the first movie so scary. And so apparently, as a response to the feedback that people gave after the first movie, they figured that the best thing to do in order to address that feedback would be to add in some flashback sequences into the film to show the strangers as children and explain that the whole Tamara thing comes from one of them getting jealous over another one liking a different girl, so she kills her.
Is Tamara here?
They also use this time very well in setting up the attack boar, and thank God for that, because I thought it was dumb, but now it makes sense. It seems like they thought this would be super disturbing, but it never gets close to that. We're supposed to believe that the sociopathic child who smiles after someone murdered a girl because he kissed her is also going to get super concerned and help someone who fell off their bike and make sure they're all right. It's just so goddamn cliche. We have the girl killing animals and smiling when people get hurt, and then we have a moment that's the equivalent of that burn it all down kid from South Park, where she destroys all of her sandcastles after a girl kicks one over. And Tamara stares at her for a second. I don't know in what world it would be thought that this is the thing that was missing from the first movie, but there we have it. We learn that one of the strangers, who I'm not even going to bother checking the name of since they removed the hair from one of them and made the two women blend together now, is the diner lady who served Maya and Ryan at the start of the first one. How interesting and cool. To top off the stupid cake, we have Scarecrow grabbing the mask of his fallen pie deliverer and holding it up to his face in sadness when he learns that she's died, which further shows how little these movies actually understand these characters because they're humanizing them way too much. It's extremely goofy, and it's this moment that left me laughing in tears when the credits rolled. Here's the thing. I have many more notes about this movie that I haven't written into the script yet. But at this point, it would just be nitpicks. And I'm already tired of talking about the movie. How did Maya manage to jump out of the car so easily when this dude was sitting right beside her? Why did an arrow to the back kill this woman instantly? Why was Maya's knife still pointing up when the boar rolled off her back? Why did they trick me into thinking that a first look at In a Violent Nature 2 had dropped when this still came out? That was mean. I have many more of these kinds of complaints, but what's the point? This movie is not good. It's better than the first chapter, but that bar is sitting at the depths of the Marianas Trench, and so it's not really a compliment to say that. The third one is gonna be out soon, and I'm sure it'll be a masterpiece. Can't wait to talk about it. Thanks for watching through to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video enough that you want to see more, and if that's the case, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell because YouTube can sometimes suck at recommending channels. A huge thank you to my wonderful Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members who are a massive help in allowing me to continue committing as much time as I can to making these videos. If you want to gain access to things like behind the scenes material or gain early access to my videos, consider supporting me on either platform. As always, thank you for stopping by Rocklin Graves. I hope you've enjoyed your stay.